Hi, I'm Dede Wilson, and I'm going to show you how to make one of my favorite brownie recipes. These brownies are a perfect combination of cakey and fudgy. They're right in the middle. I think you should have many brownie recipes in your repertoire because sometimes the mood strikes for something extra fudgy, sometimes you want something a little more cakey. These are smack dab in the middle, and actually the way I like them the best. So it's going to start out with semi-sweet chocolate and butter, and I've put them together in this microwavable bowl because I'm going to melt them in the microwave. I not only find that very convenient to do, but also makes for easy cleanup. I don't have to do anything on the top of the stove. And while the butter and chocolate is melting, I'm going to whip the eggs and sugar in the bowl of my 5-quart KitchenAid mixer. And in this instance, I'm using the balloon whip. We're trying to bring volume and air into the egg sugar mixture, and the balloon whip is going to do just that. So we're going to put on the attachment. And the chocolate, by the way, this recipe, you want chocolate that's about 55% cocoa mass, maybe go up to 60%, but no higher, or the texture of the brownies will be different than that intended. So I'm going to get this in the microwave, and then I'll be right back. The chocolate and butter is melted in the microwave, as I mentioned, and this is going to depend on how familiar you are with your microwave. The problem with standardizing recipes for microwaves is that my microwave could be an 1100 watt, yours could be a 1200 watt, so my high power is not going to be the same as yours. But I highly recommend getting familiar with your microwave so you can use it in the kitchen when you're baking. The butter and chocolate are melted together. I'm just going to whisk them together so that they're combined. And as I mentioned, the chocolate is about at 55%. And now it's just smooth. That's it. We just want to bring it together. Now I just want this to cool down a little bit, so while the heat is coming off of that, we're going to turn to whipping some air into the eggs and sugar using the balloon whip attachment. So I have my sugar already measured out. That's going to go right into the bowl. And 5 large eggs. Always use the size egg called for. In this case, it is large. In baking recipes, you can pretty much assume that it's a large egg, even if it doesn't specify. These are at room temperature, which is going to help them whip up. And we have 5. There we go. Now just take a look at where the ingredients are. They're down here, and the balloon whip is going to add air into the mixture, as I said, and wait till you see how much it increases. So as always, when using the tilt head, we just bring the tilt head down, make sure you engage the locking mechanism. And for something like this, we're just going on high. Almost there. So the combination of the room temperature eggs and the power of this 325 watt mixer is what's allowing us to do this so quickly and so easily. Look at this. Thick. I'm going to show you what we're looking at here. Look at this. This is exactly what we want. This is called beating until a ribbon. You see how you can kind of see the ribbon as it dribbles back onto the rest of the mixture? That's what you want. And look how pale. Beautiful. So this is our egg and sugar mixture. And now I'm going to fold the chocolate and butter mixture into here. Always have an assortment of rubber spatulas at the ready. One of the workhorses of the kitchen for sure, especially when we're baking. Now I'm going to whisk this together by hand just a little bit. There we go. And now I have my King Arthur all-purpose flour in this jar. I keep it in an airtight container. I like to aerate it a little bit with a whisk before I go in to measure. I use a dip and sweep method. And the recipe calls for 2.5 cups of flour. So I have a 1 cup measure and a 1.5 cup measure. And this way I'll be able to get the right amount of flour that I need into the rest of the brownie mixture as quickly and easily as possible. So I use the dip and sweep method, as I mentioned, and you can find more information about that elsewhere on the site. So we go in, we dip, we sweep. It's exactly what it sounds like. Goes right into there. There's my 1.5 cups. And now here's my 1 cup. Beautiful. And I already have my baking powder and my salt measured out. Baking powder, salt. And I'm going to fold this together. At this point, I'm not putting it back on the mixer because I don't need the power that the mixer provides for this particular part of the recipe. Just some broad stirring and folding motions. There we go. Perfect. Look at that. It smells so good. It smells so chocolatey right now. Okay, we're ready to put it in our pan. Now I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees, and we need a 9 by 12 inch pan right here, and some nonstick spray. Coat the bottom and the sides. I like to use a nonstick spray that's just oil. There are some sprays on the market that are a combination of oil and flour, but I like the spray that's just oil. Now I'm going to show you a trick. We're going to get the brownie batter into here, and you can see how helpful the pour spout is on this glass bowl to the KitchenAid mixer. It's going to help us get everything into the pan easily without overspilling. And the smell is really intoxicating, I gotta tell you. There we go. Now, some people like brownies in their, nuts in their brownies. Some don't. So I'm going to show you a little trick. Now, this won't work for families or guests that have a nut allergy because the nuts are going into the pan with the plain. But what you can do is we're going to turn half of this batch into brownies with nuts, and then half of the batch will be plain. I have chopped toasted walnuts right here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to scatter them. I'm going to scatter just a really thin layer over half of them. And then, with a small icing spatula, I'm going to kind of incorporate them a little bit. Just so, sometimes a little swirly motion like this works. You could do that with a butter knife. And that gets the nuts down into the batter. And then I'm going to go back again and just put some on the top so they look really pretty. And also, so when we cut the brownies, we know these have nuts, these don't. And again, if you're serving to someone with a nut allergy, I wouldn't necessarily serve them these plain brownies because they've been in such close proximity. But if you just have a household where no one has a nut allergy and just some people like plain brownies and some like some with nuts, you've got 2 in 1. So these are ready to go in the oven, and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. The brownies are baked for about 25 minutes. You want to bake them just until a toothpick inserted in the center comes out with some moist crumbs clinging. You don't want to bake them until your toothpick pick tests clean because then they'll be overbaked a little bit. Visual cues you can also look for. They'll slightly puff up. The edges will just come away from the sides of the pan. And can you see the shine on the surface? This is going to be one of those brownies that has this great crackly crust, and that has to do with the proportion of the ingredients that are in the recipe. And here you can see half were done with nuts, half not, and so the only thing to do now is to get them into our mouth, and I'm going to show you how I like to cut brownies. Now, when I owned my bakery, I was banned from the front of the store. My partner, Robin, was always in charge of cutting any kind of bar cookies or brownies because I would cut them and some would be this big and some would be that big, and there was no consistency. And of course, we were selling them all for the same price, so that didn't go over too well with the customers. So, you know, we're always looking for precision in the baking world, and we realize that there's definitely some better ways to cut brownies than others. It's not what you may think. No knives are involved. This is a bench scraper. This is a metal bench scraper. It has a sharp edge and can act like a knife. And this is a stiff plastic one. It's stiff, but it's plastic. Now, these are going to be used to cut the brownies. We're going to go down. And this way, you know, you're looking over the brownie and you can really get your grid of your brownies or your bars quite accurate. Now, this is a nonstick pan, so I'm not going to use the metal bench scraper. If you have a pan that does not have a nonstick coating, if you have a glass pan or a stainless steel pan, by all means, go for this one. But because mine has a coating and I don't want to scrape it, I'm going to use the plastic. So I'm going to come over the brownie and I'm just going to cut down into it like this and keep moving it across. And again. And again. And the size of the brownies are really up to you. So I make recommendations, of course, but you can tailor it to however you like. And once you have whatever your grid is of brownies, then what I like to do is use a small, this is an offset icing spatula, and I find that this is really good for going in. And look at that. Look how cleanly and beautifully this brownie comes out of the pan. And that's a combination of the fact that we used a nonstick pan that's very well made. This one happens to be a Wilton, and I really like it a lot. It has even heat conductivity. We coated it with nonstick spray. Then we used our cutting technique, and look, just as I promised you, there's a little bit, you can see that it's fudgy, but not overly so. We have this beautiful crackly crust on the top. It's very funny, when you read about brownies, people have a thing about that crackly crust. People want to know, how do you get that? How do you make that? And like I said, it has to do with the proportion of ingredients, and in this case, the recipe is spot on, and you're going to get that result every time. Also, if you use the type of chocolate recommended, which, as I said, just to remind you, is about a 55%. That's what we want. And there we go. Look at this. Beautiful brownies. I'm partial to the ones with the nuts. What can I say? Little fudgy, little cakey, crackly crust. Really delicious, moist. Store these in an airtight container at room temperature for 2 or 3 days, if they last that long. Awesome. You can find this recipe and many more at Bakepedia.com. Happy baking.